Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How many people do we have? Is everybody here, or am I, for some reason, my screen
All right, I
isn't?
see one. Nikki, Victor.
I think we're missing a couple. Just Miss Schofield, I believe.
Nikki, Tara, Sarah, Victor.
I think we're missing Miss Cabral and Miss Schofield for sure.
And where's Carly?
And Miss Reish. Yep.
All right.
Those three. Yep. Well,
Here's Carly.
Okay, here we go. I see 8. Who are we missing?
Mrs. Cabral, I believe, Karen Cabral.
All right, we'll give her another minute or two.
I did send a link to her email. I can reach out if we don't see her in a few minutes, okay?
Yeah, well, I only have it just at 7 o'clock, so.
Yep, absolutely.
Karen just joined us.
I see her. I'll let her connect first. Karen, are you on? All right, everybody's muted on the school committee, but
Yeah, Chairperson McBride, everyone should be able to unmute. And as they're listed as a co-host and if anyone has issues, please text me or email me. Absolutely. And we
all
should-
right, then I'd like to call this meeting to order. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance
To the
To
flag
the flag of the
of the United
United
States
States
of America
of America
and to the
and to the
republic
republic
for which it
for which
stands,
we stand,
one nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with liberty and justice
justice
for all.
Thanks, everybody. All right, public comment. Do we have any public comment? Kate?
I did receive notice of one person who would like to make public comment. And before we call on that person, I would like anyone else who's interested to raise their blue hand in the Zoom function. And we will call on them as we receive them.
Hey, could I read the regs for public comments? So for those people who don't know, there is a 15-minute limit for all comments, and individuals are asked to limit comments to 3 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cabral. Kate?
So I see someone who, it's not the easiest to find the blue hand, but Mrs. Reish, Carly Reish asked for public comment. And so she was the one that I received notice from.
Thank you, Kate. I can't find the blue hand.
I don't see it either. Mine's red, I think. Go ahead, Carly.
Thank you. Good evening. I would like to begin by wishing Happy Hanukkah to the members of the community who celebrate. Tonight is the 5th night of Hanukkah, and to also acknowledge the celebration of the festivities of Kwanzaa that began on December the 26th. I would like to request going forward the school committee leadership, as well as chairs of our subcommittees, please consult their calendars before scheduling official school committee business, so that folks like me don't have to choose between an important meeting and celebrating a significant evening with their families. I took the liberty of cross-checking the list of proposed school committee meetings and workshops for the coming year that was distributed, and only found one date, that of April the 26th, 2021, which is second Passover, for the Jewish community that might potentially provide a conflict for some families. I wanted to make sure that as a district, we remember the families that may look different from our own, so that we can, in a meaningful and authentic way, make all families feel seen and valued. I realize that the meeting dates for the school committee are in the later part of the agenda for this evening, but I felt it appropriate to address it now as it pertains to this evening specifically. Thank you.
Thank you, Carly. Is there anybody else? All right, hearing none, let's move on to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. I'm not going to read it. I'm just asking for a motion. to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Questions? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The ayes have it. Yes, all right, now we're going to move on to discussion. The first thing on our agenda is the approval of the bus contract. I'm going to turn to Mary Ann because she has some information before we have a discussion on the bus contract.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This bus contract is a slight variation of the bus contract which you had approved in September, which was part of the bid on the bus contract, which you actually had approved the bid back in June. The change in this contract is, if you recall, in September, we left the area of what we would pay if the buses didn't run to be negotiated. The bus contractors came back and would not accept that. At the time, I explained to the committee that the state of Rhode Island, when they negotiated with statewide transportation, had actually offered their bus contractors a 50% payment for any days that the buses didn't run. Some of the communities close to you actually negotiated that they would pay the first 10 days full price of the buses not running and then pay 40% going forward after that. I asked Mrs. Fogel to look at the numbers and let me know before we went to negotiations, which of those two options was better. She was able to determine that the 50% was a better option, but that wasn't good enough for me. So I went back to the bus contractors along with Mrs. Fogel, and we said, okay, we'd be willing to pay 50%. However, this year, the calendar, when we met with the bus contractors, was 172 days, according to the Department of Education. So we got them to agree that we would not be working off 180, we would be working off 172, but we put in it that we would be working off the state calendar. So the calendar and the document that you have in front of you tonight, which is backup, said that the statewide calendar was 172. However, today, the Commissioner of Education put out a new calendar, and this is going to be discussed later on in this agenda. The new calendar actually has the state calendar at 169 days. So before we have any discussion on what is in this document, what I'm sharing with you is that the state calendar now is 169 days. So when I ask you to consider approving this document, it will be with me changing 172 to 169. So we've basically saved 3 more days of paying the 50%. Now, I want to be clear, I do not have the bus companies okay with the 169. I did have the okay with 172, but since we agreed that it would be the statewide calendar, and as of this morning, the statewide calendar went down to 169, I did send them an email earlier on when I found out it was 169. I did not go back to them. So it's a little bit better than what I had put in front of you this week. But I can tell you that I will have to go back to them and say statewide calendar means 169 and hope that they will accept it should you vote on this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mary Ann. In fact, we have voted on it. We just waited for the negotiations that Mary Ann entered into with them. So What I would really like to do tonight is entertain a motion to accept the contract with 169 days on it. So that we can have, it's not so that we can have a discussion, but in order to have a discussion on the bus contract, we do need to make a motion.
Well, before we do that, Marge, I understand that, but wouldn't we be better off saying the state calendar rather than 169 days?
Yes.
Because we don't know what's going to happen. Let's not go for a number. Let's go for a state calendar.
I
Okay,
would be in agreement with that, Madam Chair.
I
Thank you.
agree. Thank you. So I need a motion to award the bus contract based on the number of days in the state calendar.
I'll make a motion that we accept the contract with the stipulation that is the state calendar amount of days.
I need a second.
I'll second.
I know it's hard to think that we even have to pay them a dime if we're not using them, but we're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. So discussion, go for it. Anybody? Yes, Sheila.
Tina, do you have the breakout of what the monitors are versus what the base contract is?
So the monitor, they're $27.58 an hour per monitor. It was listed in the alternate bid. I can
Yeah,
see November's bill that we received for monitors. It was a little over 1,000 hours for the month.
okay, so do we have like a set standard amount that we pay every month, or like how's that done? Because I don't see the contract for them.
So
We never got the attachments for these bids, so I'm just curious.
I'm sorry, never got the attachments for which bids?
Yes, so for the bid that we, like back in September, we never got the attachments that go along with the contract. So I'm just curious to see what the total cost or the average would be for this coming year for monitors.
So it depends. There are a number of factors. Obviously, the bus monitors are not our employees, so they're employed by First Student. So we pay when bus monitors ride the bus. Sometimes they're absent, so we would not pay for those days. Sometimes, for whatever reason, a monitor needs to be switched to a bus because of another reason. So the number is fluid in that we are only paying for actual monitors that we use based on number of days we run, based on number of hours that the buses have to run. So for instance, if there were a shorter run, for instance, longer.
I understand that. But so do we have we should have some sort of understanding of where we're going to be for this year?
So bus monitors are required for elementary buses. So we typically anticipate that we'll have 19 monitors a day. Because there would be one bus monitor per at least elementary bus, but the entire run. So for instance, if a bus were to run for 4.5 hours a day, let's just say between the morning and afternoon run for both high school, middle school, and elementary, we would not necessarily be paying for the monitor for that entire time.
Okay, so do you have an estimate of how much it's going to cost us for this year?
Not right this second, but I absolutely can get you that.
Yeah, I think that's important.
Okay.
Thanks, Mrs. Fogel. Sometime in the next couple of days, if you could let her know, I'd appreciate that.
Sure.
Thanks, Tina.
Any other questions? Yes, Vic.
Tina, my question is it a state law that we have to put monitors on the buses?
So I would argue it's an unfunded mandate. So there was a law that I'm going to date myself. I think it's over 25 years at this point. There was a death following a student died many years ago. And since then, the state of Rhode Island required that all elementary schools needed to have a monitor on the bus. It is, however, an unfunded mandate because there are no funds from the state in order to pay for those. So yes, it is a requirement for elementary students.
Up to what grade?
Sometimes people argue 6th grade is still elementary, but it's definitely pre-K to 5. 6th grade is negligible depending on who you talk to.
Thank you.
Mr. Cabral, to add to that, the only time that you can get an exception or a variance from a monitor is if you do door-to-door for elementary. So on some runs, if you were to do a door-to-door, both pickup and delivery, you could get a variance on that monitor. But otherwise, it's absolutely correct. You have to have a monitor on elementary buses.
Well, I remember, Marianne, I remember we had the death in this town, and we put the monitors on before the law came into effect. That's why I asked you if it was.
Right.
Thank
Right.
you.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those issues in the district, unfortunately, over the years. Anybody else? All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Hand, please.
Oh,
Well, I can see you, so. Opposed?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. All right, so it's 8 in the affirmative and 1 abstention. So, Marianne, if you would let the superintendent know when that's all settled, or however
Correct.
you do it, so that the school committee can know very quickly whether we have it signed or not. I'd appreciate that.
You're welcome. I certainly will give you that information.
All right, I'm going to shift here and go to C first before we do the COVID response. But I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Carly for taking time out of her family's special days to be here tonight, and to point out to all of us that we need to be cognizant of those days. She's absolutely correct. And I would appreciate it if we would take Monday, April 26th and make it Wednesday, April 28th. And if anybody else has any other issues with the meeting dates, please let me know. Thanks, Carly.
Thank you very much, Marge. I appreciate that.
Marge, do we make a motion and then we amend it from the calendar that you have right now?
Yeah, but I want to see if anybody else has any other issues with
The change?
the change. The reason that we're going to
What is
shift,
that date again?
what?
What is the date again?
April 26th.
Got it. Thank you.
I didn't know if anybody else had concerns about when the dates were. And I also wanted to explain that normally we've been having, if we couldn't meet on Monday, we've been meeting on Tuesday, but our attorney isn't available on Tuesday. So that's why our alternate meeting dates will now be Wednesday.
You want a motion?
Yep, please.
I'll make a motion that the list of meeting dates on for 2021 as presented.
Second.
Any more discussion?
I have a question. So, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place to put this, but for the workshops, is it possible to get a list of presentations that will be taking place at least in the next 3 months at those workshops? Or can members of the school committee request specific presentations? Is that something that we can do?
It is something we can do, but for the purposes of this vote, it's not germane to when the meeting dates are. So we can have a discussion about what kinds of topics are going to be covered under the workshops. I don't know that, I'd have to talk to Dr. Bryce to see if 90 days was too far out or not too far out. But I'm hearing your question, and I think we can talk about that and find out if we can do something like that. Because I don't necessarily think it's a bad idea.
And Madam Chair, would that be something that we might discuss in a retreat, which we have been?
Yeah, we're getting to that. For everybody who's wondering, we're going to have a retreat in January at one of our meetings, and you will be advised well in advance of that retreat. And it hasn't come up yet because we don't have the moderator set yet, but we are working on it. Are we not?
We are working on it.
We are working on it. So
Marge, what is the transfer to date in April? From what to what?
from Monday to Wednesday, so it'd be the 26th to the 28th.
I'd like to make a motion that we amend the calendar from the 26th of April to the 28th of April.
I need a second for that amendment.
Second that amendment?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Now I need you to vote on the original motion for the calendar. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. All right, now we're going to get to the meat of the meeting. Dr. Bryce, you're up front and center. I turn it over to you.
Hopefully everyone can see the screen. So this is an opportunity to share with the school committee as well as the broader BWRSD community our plan for the week beginning December 21st through January the 11th. We certainly, as a district, have been discussing staffing shortages and how we are reallocating staff around the district. I have personally been having conversations with fellow superintendents in the East Bay as well as around the state. And we have known since I think maybe early this weekend that that RIDE was potentially going to come out with something. RIDE released two documents this afternoon at approximately 1:45 p.m. Those documents directly impact what we're doing in terms of our plan for the week of December the 21st through January the 11th. So when we think about what we are talking about in terms of our plan, when we were talking about reopening, we were really looking at the health and safety of students. What are the options? How are we going to make sure that we have engaging academics and socio-emotional support? And the necessary staffing and resources was an issue, but that issue has become even much more pronounced as we have gotten deeper into operating in a pandemic. We certainly know that we can operate, and we have been doing a great job. So let me just take a moment and say to all of our students who have been coming to school and doing what we've asked them and working really hard, thank you very much. To our teachers who have been in classrooms every day and working really hard, to our administrators and everyone in our district that really has pitched in to make this successful. We really have been successful, and we are very optimistic about that. But there is something that I don't believe we counted on, as well as I think other districts in the state and RIDE, which is the impact of contact tracing. And so I'm going to discuss that later on. So as everyone knows, we have a host of mitigation strategies. Just briefly, daily screenings that our parents are completing online and submitting before students walk into the building. We know that our students are wearing masks. We are maintaining social distancing with desks 6 feet apart. And then as an additional component, we have worked with RIDE. We've purchased air purifiers. They have been installed in all of our buildings. So let me take a moment and just say that the air purifiers are not in lieu of, they are in addition to the upgrades to the existing HVAC systems in our schools that our outside contractor has spent some time working to make sure that everything is operating. So with those systems and the air purifiers, we are very confident that our teachers can close the windows, that our teachers can operate with the air purifiers in those classrooms. And we will be providing more information as soon as we get the last report. We're still waiting for one more report from that particular contractor. But we also know that in terms of how we're operating this year, we have a number of students that are fully distant. Their parents or guardians have made a decision that they're going to be working from home. We know that our elementary, for everyone else that remains, are full in person. For middle school, we have a hybrid where they actually have pods. They are coming in every 2 days, for 2 days in, 2 days out, 2 days in, 2 days out. and that the teachers and staff are rotating through the pods. We know that at the high school, we have a hybrid. Students are coming in 2 days a week. 1 day a week is a virtual Mondays or virtual support Mondays, which we'll talk about. So here are some of the challenges that we see as we've gotten into this. So we know this, it's, you know, all across the state, all across the country, we see an increased positivity rate of COVID-19. So thankfully, the positivity rate has been somewhat low. But the problem is that every time we have a positive case, it requires school staff, our nurses, administrators to identify and work with RIDO, the Department of Health, to identify what individuals would be considered close contacts. So a close contact is considered someone that was within 6 feet of another person for 15 minutes or more or longer, whether they were wearing a mask or not wearing a mask. Here's what we know. We know that as part of our protocol, all individuals in a building are supposed to wear a mask. There is, however, a time when individuals are not wearing a mask, and that is during lunch. As a result, we are increasingly getting information from RIDO that RIDO wants to take the entire group of individuals that are in a room that are having lunch and put them on pause until they can do additional contact tracing. So that is problematic when it happens to students or staff. We also know that the quarantine requirements, those requirements have been put out by the CDC. They have been put out and adopted by RIDO. Those requirements initially at the start of the school year, 14 days, it was a pretty hard and fast rule. About 2 weeks ago, the CDC published new guidance. RIDO needed about a week to take a look at it. And then late last week, they issued new guidance, which reduces the quarantine requirements from 14 days down to 10 or to 7 with certain conditions. So it can be 10 days and you don't have to take a test. 7 days, you would have to take a test at 5 days, and that test would come back negative. And then at day 7, you could return, and there would still be stipulations that the individual, the parent, or the staff member would have to monitor for symptoms. One of the other things that RIDO and the governor announced this is to increase testing. And so districts were asked whether or not we wanted to be a part of initial testing. I have taken the liberty of signing the district up to be a test location. And that means that working with RIDO, RIDO will set up, along with our nurses, and operate a testing site. It is strictly voluntary, but it will allow parents, students, and staff from the community to actually come and get tested for those students and those staff members. We think that's important, especially with the new quarantine guidelines that have a shorter incubation period. We also know that there continues to be a delay in notification from individuals or RIDO, which potentially means that more students and staff are impacted. What does that mean in layman's terms? Here's what it means. The quicker we find out about a presumed positive case, the quicker we can do contact tracing. The longer it takes for us to find that out, and if the case is a positive case and the individual has been in the building, it means potentially more people are impacted. So how has that played out? Well, what it's done is it means that there are more individuals that have been required to be placed on pause by the school system or quarantined by the Department of Health. And then with all of the school closures that we're seeing around the state, at last count, I thought there were approximately 16 different districts that were going to some version of distance learning for next week and the following week, it is imperative because we know that our staff doesn't only live here. Our staff lives in other towns and other places in the state, and they potentially would be impacted. And then finally, I do have to make this comment. It is critically important that we absolutely limit staff and that are eating in together, right? So there should not be any staff that are eating together. There should not be any staff that are eating in a staff lunchroom. If we are doing that, it needs to absolutely stop because if someone in that setting were to test positive, everyone in that setting would be a close contact. And so I know it is an imposition. I know it is something that contractually everyone is supposed to have a place where they can go and they can have lunch. But for right now, we need to have individuals, our staff members, eat by themselves, not eat with other staff members, maybe go outside, walk around. I wish it were a little warmer to do that, but that is critically important. So what did RIDE tell us today? So here are the options. Remember, they gave it to us this afternoon, approximately 2 p.m., 1:45. The week of the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, district flexibility based on weather, staffing, scheduling due to the holidays. The week of January 4th through the 8th, the commissioner has placed the entire state on PD / distance learning days on the 4th, 5th, and 6th. The first available day when we could bring students back would be the 7th. The week of January the 11th through the 15th is a staggered schedule with secondary students returning no later than January 15th. And then I will remind you that January the 18th is the national holiday for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And the reason why I bring that up is because as you look at the schedule, what we are trying to do is identify more in-person instructional days if possible. So right now, with the way that the state has laid out the options, students could be on distance learning for up to 10 days. And I personally think that it is not quite what I would do. We are trying to find a happy medium, and we think that we may have found one. So here's the plan. So for December the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, all schools will operate full distance learning for students. COSI will operate at each elementary on a limited basis for those K-5 families who need childcare. What COSI has told us is that they will open it up and offer it to the individuals that are already utilizing COSI. And then after that, they would open it up to other families. Grab and go breakfast and lunch will be available at 2 pickup locations, KMS and Mount Hope. They would operate from, I believe, 9 until 10:30 each day. The week of January 4th through the 8th, all BWRSD schools will operate full distance, just like they are doing on the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. COSI, again, will operate on that limited basis for K-5 families, and grab and go breakfast and lunch will be available for pickup. So the idea that we would start school on a Thursday and Friday was not a decision that we thought was in the best interest of students. We wanted to start them at the start of a week. So the decision is that we're going to return all students to in-person at the elementary on January the 11th and return to hybrid at KMS and Mount Hope on January the 11th. All distance learning students on January the 11th would remain distance learning. So of the available days of that window, of the available days, we are using 8 as distance learning. And so we are using less of those days than the state is providing. And we believe that it is the right compromise in terms of safety, in terms of staffing, in terms of all of the things that we're dealing with right now. And this is everything on that one page. Again, the reason why we note the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. holiday is because if we waited to bring secondary students back on the 15th, they would be back on that Friday. They would be out of school on that Monday. Don't think it makes sense. We're bringing everybody back on that Monday, so everybody gets a full week, and then they have the holiday off that next Monday. Questions?
Can you take that off so I can see people? Thanks. Questions, anybody? Everybody? No, I'm not. Yes. Yes, Sarah.
Thank you. Dr. Bryce, I was just wondering, what is your reasoning behind coming back, feeling like it's safe enough to come back those few days earlier than the state is recommending?
Yes, so the state is actually given a window, and the window for the state extends to the 15th. But one of the things that the state is doing is they're also counting the number of days that students would be out of school to ensure that if anybody has traveled, there are enough days so that any potential quarantine period would be over. And so by the 11th, that would give 10 days after the 1st for the new CDC RIDO approved quarantine period to have ended. And so that's why I think it's a good decision to bring them back on that day.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Sheila?
So those students with 504s or will they, or like IEPs, or will they be accommodated within those full distance learning? Like if COSI's too full, like will they be able to get services to help them and the families that don't have access? Like how are we going to do that?
So we're certainly going to work with COSI, and we will open up the opportunity to discuss with any families that don't think that they have internet access. One of the things that we have done is made sure that all of our students have Chromebooks, all of our students have internet access. And so over the next several days, because again, well, not even again, we know that we might have the potential of some winter weather later this week. So we need to make sure that all of our students are prepared to work from home if necessary on Thursday.
Right. I just like, are we looking at the number of people that don't have internet service or need extra support? Like they're either, you know, healthcare workers or essential workers, so they don't have the support at home. How are we kind of reaching out as a community to help those families?
Yeah, well, after this, I believe sometime tomorrow morning, COSI is going to put out the announcement.
Okay.
So any of those families K-5 that would need that support would contact COSI so that we could potentially put them on a list to support their students. And we just need to see what the capacity and what the demand from the community will be.
Okay, and if families have, are we going to put something out if they don't have internet service? There's going to be jumpers or whatever the hotspots. Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We will make sure that we'll put that out in the community update. And we'll
Thank you.
Sarah? Sarah?
You're on mute.
Okay, sorry. So first, I apologize because I feel unprepared for this. We just received this information 45 minutes ago, even though that it came to this to the office much sooner. I am very concerned about this situation, that we will be putting these kids on distance learning for so long. I am not saying anything against the teachers. I feel the teachers are doing the best they can. But I know as a parent, distance learning is not the best opportunity or option for anyone. I, again, am very disheveled with my thoughts because I was not prepared for this. But are the teachers going to be going into the building, or will the teachers be teaching from home during this time?
So teachers, we made a decision that teachers are going to have the option to utilize the buildings. So the buildings will be open and available for teachers. And here's really what we recognize. There are going to be some teachers that have a much better setup in the school building in terms of technology than they might have at home. And so they're going to want access to the building. I will have to remind them, and the principals will have to remind them of the importance of making sure that they are staying away from other adults, that they're not congregating, they're not eating lunch together. And that is something that we certainly will do.
Okay, my next question is, I would want, just prior to all of this information, how many students are not logging in as we speak? I know many students may be failing classes. I'm talking the high school level, the middle school level. How many students are not logging in? Are we able to record that? Are we able to monitor that?
We are able to, so login is akin to attendance, and we do have attendance data. So we would be able to provide attendance data ma'am, if you, as a member of the school committee, request it.
Okay, no, I did request it on Friday. So if you could provide that to us.
Wait a minute. I think Dr. Bryce said that Tara has a legitimate question because I wonder about children that are truant and children that are not coming to school. And I care very much about and worry very much about the students who we just don't know where they are, and nobody's reaching out to them. So I think that we could provide that information in the next couple of days to the entire school committee so that they can see what we've been doing and what the truant officer has found, and if he has any concerns, if you have any concerns, if you could just communicate that to all of us, I think that
Absolutely.
would be great.
And I will mention that the conversation that I've had with principals, primarily at the high school and middle school, we believe that we have about 200 students at the high school that have poor attendance, either in person, full distance, or some combination. We believe that we have 75 of those students at the middle school. And so that's our conversation. Diane Santa and I have crafted a letter that's going to go out. So I will mention, because I think it is appropriate at this time, that our focus has to be on trying to re-engage these students, but at the same time, we cannot utilize the same techniques that we have in the past. So let me tell you what we typically have done in the past. What we typically have done when students are chronically absent from class is that we tell them, them and their parents, that if you don't improve, you are going to fail the class. I think it is problematic in the midst of a pandemic, with everything else that children and families are going through, for that to be the message from the school. And so our message instead has been, you know what, how can we work with you? How can we help you? How can we try to get you better engaged in the school process? But I think, Mrs. Thibodeau, I think you actually have the right question, which is distance learning difficult for some students? Absolutely it is. And we need to have additional ways to engage some of the harder to engage students.
So I actually have another question.
Carly, did you want to comment on her question?
Oh, sorry.
I was just hoping when we get that data about who isn't logging in, if we could also have data for last year, so we can have a frame of reference about the differences between when we're in building and when we're doing distance, just for some context.
Absolutely.
I think we can do that. It'll just take us a couple of days. If everybody would be patient, I'm sure, Dr. Bryce, you could get that out to everybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Tara, you had another question.
I did. So the information, what are we doing, or have we looked at the option of actually just closing the schools for that week and adding it to taking away April vacation or adding it to the end of the school year. We know that distance learning is not the best option. We know that's not in the best interest of the kids. We know that fresh air and being outside is good. We know that we have more opportunities and options when we do that. If there is a serious health issue or concern or attendance issues, then maybe if we just completely closed and then took that time up when we have more opportunities and more options, have we considered that?
Well, I think to your point, distance learning is exactly that. It is closing to give the rate of infection and the possibility of staff and students being close contacts, given that opportunity to dissipate. And so that's why I think what you see from the 21st through January the 11th as that window that allows, hopefully community spread to decrease, and as well as any potential quarantine period to also be included. In terms of what do we do at the end of the year, we are beginning discussions about what the options are. I can tell you that the conversation has centered around whether or not we would operate a summer program. I don't want to call it summer school because of that, and that has connotations. But I do believe that we want to have a program that would be enrichment, that would help students that have been really successful, give them an ability to continue to move forward. The students that are sort of holding serve, help them to move a little ahead. And certainly those students that have not been successful, to bring them in. I would tell everybody that while we think that the idea of some sort of summer academy is the right idea, back to your point, Mrs. Thibodeau, I think the problem is kids like summer. They like to be outside. We've got a big bay out there and a bunch of trails. I don't think we can make it mandatory. We can certainly suggest it to our to our parents and guardians. But I think the question is going to be whether or not we get a sizable number of the students that really need it to participate.
So I'm not actually asking about the summer because to be honest with you, I think fall of 21 is something that the district's going to need to look at, expectations, where everyone will be starting. So I think summer intervention or summer enrichment is definitely something that needs to be addressed. But I'm talking more about distance learning for students. They have difficulty concentrating and paying attention when they are at home. When they are in person, they are much more successful. And some, not all, but most are in that circumstance. If we are going to take them out for 2 weeks, basically for distance learning, my number one concern is students with IEPs and 504s, because those students have already not gotten the best deal this year. And now we're taking them out for an additional 2 weeks. So have we considered then possibly other options, such as bringing in our 504s and IEPs on virtual Mondays at the high school? So as we go forward, instead of letting those students stay home on Mondays, bringing in our 504s and IEPs at the high school, or at the middle school level, bringing them in 5 days a week.
Yeah, so
we need to make some compensations up here.
Well, no, I think the ideas that you're suggesting are things that have been discussed. Here's what I would say about 504s and IEPs. The majority of students with 504s and IEPs, and we will give you the data along with the other data that has been requested. We'll give that to you later this week. But I can tell you that we do not see that the majority of students with 504s and IEPs actually are faring worse on distance learning than they did in person. right? So most of the IEPs are not written for students that have significant cognitive disabilities, all right? And so that is one of the things that we have to clearly look at. Every 504 and every IEP is not the same, right? There are a range of disabilities and a range of supports that students need in order to be successful. So we're not seeing across the board every student with a 504, every student with an IEP that is struggling. Now, having said that, are some of those students struggling? Yes. And when they are, our special educators, our teachers, Ed Clark, other staff are working to address them. And so we will continue to look and see how many of the students in the 200 that we've identified at the high school and the 75 at the middle school have a 504 or an IEP, and we'll be able to give that to you.
Thank you, Dr. Bryce. I think a lot of the communication that we've received from parents has to do with those children who do have special needs, and maybe they don't appear to be, I'm not sure what the word is to use, but they're certainly, and Shannon, I see your raised hand, they're certainly worth our consideration, and they certainly may be made worse because they're not in school, vice being at home. So I think those are reasonable questions for Tara to ask, and reasonable questions that we all should be concerned about. I see, I'm shifting. I see, Shannon, that you got your hand raised, but we're not taking public comment on this tonight. This is just a discussion amongst the school committee members. I am concerned about any child that receives extra services. I'm concerned about how those services are being delivered. But I'm also concerned about the children, and I believe some of the other members of the school committee have talked about this, who are in homes where their parents aren't there, where there is no supervision, where there isn't anybody there to help them. I'm worried about them too, and school often is a lifeline for them. And with that, I'm going to move to Vic, because I'd rather listen to you guys than listen to myself. Go ahead.
Madam Chair, I heard what you said about this not being a public discussion, but the people who are online right now should understand that if they have a question, then they should submit it to the superintendent, and then I'm sure he would get back to them and answer whatever questions they have. So they do have a voice. They just have to go through the superintendent and get that done. All right, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cabral. You're absolutely correct.
Once in a while I am.
What?
Once in a while I am.
Well, yeah, I got to give you that. But tonight we didn't put it in public comment. So, but I would hope that everyone watching clearly understands that they're free to text Dr. Bryce or any of the other members, any members of the school committee, or the administrative staff about the issues that they might have regarding this subject, because I want everybody to have some input in the end.
And Madam Chair, the one thing I would say, just 2 points of clarity. So we're concerned about all students, all 3,200 of our students, students that have been identified needing additional support, those students that haven't been identified. We have found that there have been some students that have been very, very successful in previous years that aren't doing as well this year, right? And so we're equally as concerned about all of our students because we know that we want to make sure that they learn as much as possible, even under the trying circumstances that we have. And we also are planning for what comes next, because we know that we're going to have to do some work this summer, some work next year to close some gaps that are being created because of the year that we're having. The other thing I would mention, and I think the community knows this, but I have a pretty robust email response. And so if anybody has a question or they have a concern, please don't hesitate to call me or to call me here. Or if you've got my cell number, call me or email me and we will get back to you. Our goal is always to get back to people within 24 hours. That goes for me, that goes for anybody on my team. We might not be able to give you the answer, but we can tell you, you know what, we've got the question, we'll get back to you.
Thank you. Tara?
I did have one follow-up question. At the beginning of your presentation, Dr. Bryce, you mentioned the air purifying system, and I just wanted to clarify the information because there has been a lot of confusion. So you are waiting for one more report from the manufacturer?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. I'm actually waiting for one more report from ATC.
ATC.
Which is our vendor that came in, and they're the ones that did the work on our heating and ventilation systems to make sure that everything was operating the way they are designed.
When do you expect to get that report?
They are backed up. They are dealing with COVID just like the rest of society. And so we expected it about a week and a half ago. They're a little behind. And so we're waiting on that last report.
And then once we have that report, then we will be able to tell the teachers and the staff that it is okay to close the windows and the doors.
Well, we actually can tell them
during
that
the day.
Yeah, we can actually tell teachers that they can close the windows now. So
it doesn't have to be 42 degrees in our kids' classrooms.
Absolutely, they can close the windows. And so I have walked the high school. I've seen the fans in the windows when it's 45 degrees. And I've seen the air purifiers. Tom Wood, our director of facilities, is here. He has all the reports. He's looked at all of the air purifiers. We've put double air purifiers in some rooms that needed it. We are at a place and time where teachers can feel a level of confidence that with the existing system and the air purifiers on top of that, that they can close the windows and they will have the 4 to 6 air changes per hour that have been recommended by RIDA.
Dr. Bryce, I would appreciate it if when all of those tests are done and they finally get finished, because I also appreciate that probably some of the people that work there have COVID, that the school committee as a whole get a copy of that report.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Yes, Nikki.
Dr. Bryce, in the report that you are going to work on looking at sort of attendance issues and chronic, absentee issues, would it be possible to include numbers on how many students are opting for full distance learning, and then look at how many of those students that we're seeing chronic absenteeism, how many of those are students that are in person versus distance learning?
Yeah, that's an easy breakout. We can do that.
Right. Because I think that would be useful to see if the absenteeism has gone up because of distance learning. They don't have to be causal, right? And then also how many students that are signed up for in-person end up doing distance learning on a given day.
That's right. Which is actually something that we did not account for early on, but now we have the reports of, oh, I missed the bus or I overslept, so I'm just gonna log in and do distance learning for the day. Yep.
Yeah, that would be helpful. I also, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, I feel like it's helpful to sort of clarify that the reason to go to full distance learning next week versus the reason to go full distance learning after the holiday are very different. The one after the holiday is to allow for that quarantine period. But the reason before the holiday appears to me that because physically we do not have enough adults to staff the building. Am I misunderstanding?
No, I think you're spot on. And if that didn't come through in the presentation, that really, I take the blame for that. But the ability to staff our buildings We were on the phone, a number of us were on the phone with principals yesterday, going over staffing, how many people are close contacts, how many people have tested positive, and are we going to close classrooms? Yep. So we were able to close classrooms yesterday,
Right.
and I did not have to close a building. But we believe that by next week, the ability to be able to fully staff all of our buildings will be compromised because of the virus, because of the confirmed cases, because of close contacts, and because of the holidays.
Right. No, I think you were clear. I think it's just easy for people listening in. I think that's an important fact that the reason for those two decisions is for different reasons. I had one more quick question, just something you said earlier about the teachers all eating together. It struck me that at the elementary level, probably particularly, it's hard for teachers to find space because the kids are eating in their classroom. So I'm just wondering what their options are. It sounds to me like they have to choose to eat with other teachers or to eat with their students. And I'm not sure which is the healthier option. It's a small detail, but.
So we are not suggesting, I am not suggesting that teachers need to eat with their students, although I am certain that there are some that do. It is certainly not a requirement. As a matter of fact, we know, and in talking with BWEA, they continue to remind us that it is the responsibility of the district to provide a place for them to, for staff to be able to have lunch. However, in the current conditions, the issue isn't that we can't provide a place for lunch. The issue is that we don't want a number of them in the same place without masks, talking, having lunch. And then if someone becomes a confirmed case, then instead of one teacher being out, I now have, I don't know, 4, I have 6, I have, 7 teachers out. And that's the type of exponential contact tracing that makes it difficult to be able to open a building.
Are you all set, Nikki, with that?
Yeah, so is there space for them to all eat individually, all of the teachers at the elementary level?
We have been suggesting that, this might be a great time to take a break and go sit in their car and things like that. But we are just really emphasizing for the next week, let's not eat together.
Got it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody else have any comment? Yes, Karen. I see you, Aaron. I'll get to you after Karen. Karen, you're muted.
So just to clarify, the teachers don't all eat lunch at the same time, right?
Correct.
Okay, so the space that's available to them, are they able to eat lunch 6 feet apart?
Okay, so here's what we're dealing with, and you may be dealing with it in your day life as well. So we've had a number of situations where we've had a confirmed case in a particular room. People have been in the room eating, and the health department has required us to put all of the individuals on pause out of an abundance of caution. So I need to keep people separated so that possibility doesn't come into play.
Okay, and it's just confusing about, and I understand the abundance of caution. But at the same time, I thought that we had clear definitions of what close contacts were.
We do, and we share that. I see Ellen Estrella, who's our one of our nurses and sort of our chief nurse. Right. She's the one that I call when I've got issues. All I can tell you is we had, when we talk to the health department, they tell us to take everybody, which doesn't make sense.
Yeah, Ellen, I see your hand up. Aaron, do you mind waiting while Ellen speaks? Mr. Hewitt, Peter, we're not taking public comment tonight. So everybody just gets to listen. Ellen, go ahead.
I wasn't going to say anything. I was going to be very quiet. But in regards to what Dr. Bryce is talking about, and the question about, because we have our 6 feet of distancing, what we have learned through this, and it just happened to us, Mount Hope on this weekend, even though you are 6 feet apart while you are eating, you are unmasked and there's talking. And so the Department of Health, prior to the school nurses having to do the contact tracing, what the Department of Health would do would be to take a 6 foot, the halo. They would take everybody in that 6 feet next to the positive person that was eating. So what they've taught us is that we have to go, like the high school, they're in their desks, and they're in a desk in the cafeteria or the gym. So you take the person in front of the positive person, you take the person to the right or the left, and you take the person to the right or the left diagonally forward. And so it's a halo effect, a cube, whatever shape you want to call it. So yes, once your mask is off, even though you're 6 feet apart, they're being a lot more cautious about putting people in quarantine. I hope that helped answer the question.
Thanks, Ellen. I think that, Nikki, you're right to ask the question because it explains how we have the domino effect and the unintended consequences of people being next to each other. But I think when we go off into lunch, we sort of go off the target, which is staying apart, which is critically important. It's also important to be able to talk with your colleagues. So it's not an easy thing for anybody to have to go through. And it's important for the children to be able to speak to their friends. So everybody's been put out a bit with this, and I can understand some of their frustration. Now, Aaron, you had a question, your hand raised. You're muted, Aaron.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had one point of clarification and one question. I know that, Dr. Bryce, that you said you are anticipating decreased staffing leading up to the holiday. I guess my question is just simply, because we don't specifically know what that looks like right now, I'm guessing that this calendar has been put together at this juncture so that people can prepare based on your best guess on what is going to occur in the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And so the calendar is actually informed by RIDO. And, you know, again, we knew that they were coming out with something. So part of what we needed to do was make sure that we knew what they were going to release, and they didn't release that until about 2 p.m. this afternoon. But more importantly, we've been watching the numbers, and we work with schools every single day to get a sense of whether or not, you know, they've got enough staff to cover, and what are they doing to make sure that they can cover those absences. Increasingly, you know, we already have one school that's out because of the issue of contact tracing and testing and when those test results are due. We certainly have another school that is pretty near a tipping point. And again, because of contact tracing. And so in between now and next week, we expect that it's going to get worse. One, because of the holidays, because people take some personal time or whatever. But we also know that other districts are now moving to distance learning, which is also going to impact what we're doing. And so, as I mentioned earlier in the slide, and then Chairperson McBride mentioned, it is the domino effect. And so once one starts falling, we're going to start seeing more of that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Hold on one second, okay. I am also concerned about, I'm sorry, someone is trying a bracelet on me, a homemade bracelet at the moment, so I'm sorry if I'm slightly distracted. My concern, and other people have mentioned this, for the families with food insecurities, dealing with mental illness, domestic violence. I understand that we have COSI to help keep some of the families, some of those family students in the buildings, but I'm very nervous about what that's going to look like, because my concern for a long time has been, in this type of a situation, how do we make sure that all of the families who really need it, who might not come out and say it and ask for it, have their students in the buildings if they need that? I don't know how we reach out, and I know you said that that is something we will be working on when Mrs. Ellsworth asked about it earlier, but I am asking that as this is figured out in more detail, if the school committee could be apprised of what that looks like, how many, how we're reaching out to families, and then as it rolls along, how many families need this? What do we have to do for however much longer this goes on to make sure that those kids can be in buildings with, and also have the staff to cover it during this challenge of not having enough staff in the buildings to watch the kids. So I would just ask that we could please keep on top of that, because I understand that it's everyone's intention to do something about it, but I think it's going to be difficult and challenging. And I would like to just know what's happening along the way, so that if we need to come back here and come up with some outside the box ideas, we can do that.
You got it.
Dr. Bryce, I think that's a fair question from Aaron, except that we do need to keep confidence, and we do need to make sure that people feel safe when they tell us that they need some help or they're in extremis. So if the information is general, I think that's a really good idea, and it allows us to know exactly where we're going in real time.
Absolutely.
Yes. What?
Madam Chair, it sounds like Madam Chair, it sounds like a great job for our social workers that may be able that have great relationship with families, and may be able to reach out and to start that conversation. And that's something that I will direct Mr. Clark and his team to work on tomorrow.
Okay, but I just know that I understand Aaron's point, and if we continue to get weekly updates on where we are on it, then I think everybody here will feel a little more comfortable. Harley.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that maybe one way that we could get that general information out to families that might be in crisis, whether it's domestic violence or food insecurity, that those are things that could be mentioned in our community updates that go out. And I know that Dr. Bryce and his team have done that in the past. So I think continuing to do things like that and highlighting domestic violence resources, and if they go out to everybody, then we're able to protect particular families' privacy. Thank you.
That's a good idea. Thanks. I think that's a great idea, Carl. It's a great way to reach people. Sometimes I've heard the complaint that they get too many emails and they just turn it off. But I would suggest that during this time, read them, please, because there might be something there that you really need to know.
Absolutely. I never think you can have too much information. I think it's important to make sure that we are taking care of all of our families, no matter what they need or what they're going through. Thank you.
I think that's the goal of everybody sitting on this committee and everybody in this town. I see one hand raised. Again, I will repeat that we are not taking public comment. We're only taking comment from the school committee. And with that, Karen? Karen, I saw your hand up.
Hi, thank you. So I have two questions. Actually, one is just to clarify, Dr. Bryce, I thought that you mentioned that the new guidelines for quarantine were going into play after holiday break. And I just wanted to clarify that. And if that's the case, I was just wondering why. And secondly, I was wondering if we are considering having our students with disabilities actually continue to come to school for in-school learning.
Yeah, so two questions. The first one, the RIDO has adopted the new requirements, but anybody that was placed on quarantine under the old requirements still has the 14-day requirement. And so for right now, moving forward, we believe that what's going to happen is if anybody gets quarantined now, then by the time they're done, school will be out for winter break. When we come back, we will hopefully have the testing program from RIDO set up in our community so that parents can have students and staff can get tested so that we can, and that testing will be on a routine basis so that we hopefully can decrease the amount of either positive cases or contact tracing that's necessary in the school community. The more we do that, the more we get to stay in school and the more we get to keep kids in school and keep staff in school. So as soon as I saw that suggested from RIDE and RIDO, I signed the district up for that. It is voluntary. We're not requiring anybody, but I do think it's the right thing to do because if you get tested, then you get to come back as opposed to having to sit out for those number of days. And that will also lessen the number of staff that are out. So I see that as a huge advantage. I think the second piece, and we've talked about this before, so we're going to get you numbers. We're going to get the entire school committee numbers. But every student that has a 504, we're going to do a couple of things. We're going to break the 504 IEP numbers down so that you see them in large categories, because I think everybody believes that every 504 and every IEP it is the same. And there are some students that only receive, 1 hour per week of speech. There are some students that are in our intensive program, and then everybody in between. There are some students that are on the autism spectrum. There are some students that have a behavior disorder. And so there are different things and different disabilities. And not all of those disabilities require being in school every single day. Not all of those issues are things that are preventing students from being successful. And so we want to look at it holistically. Are there some students that have a 504 IEP for where in-person would be the best option for them? Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. But not all. And that's what we need to, right? So we have gone from, early in the pandemic, we had a much more just, everybody, cover everybody. Now we're trying to be much more, have a much more laser focus about the interventions that we put in place. And so we will take a look at that and we will share that with I will share that with the entire committee.
Dr. Bryce, though, Karen had a very specific question, and that was when we pause, I believe, Karen, this is what you were asking, when we pause next week and after the vacation, will those children continue to receive instruction in the school setting? Will all children and when I say all children, I mean all children, be distance learners come next Monday? Did I interpret that correctly, Karen, the question you asked?
Oh, the second question that we were talking about was, I was wondering if we were considering having the students with disabilities to have in-school learning, to as opposed to, you know, how you mentioned there are definitely 504s that just address, you know, not as pertinent, I guess, in the situation of a pandemic, as opposed to some others that are, you know, more involved, I guess. So I was wondering if we considered having them in school for in-school learning instead of just remote learning for all.
So I think it's something we will take a look at. But again, I think the issue of whether or not all students are faring well or poorly is not I don't think you can take a blanket approach to it. So I don't think you can take a blanket approach and say, you know what, everybody with a 504 or IEP should stay home. Everybody with a 504 or IEP should be in the building. I think it's on a case-by-case basis. If there are some students that absolutely, and we'll have that discussion, that absolutely need to be in the building because of intensive needs, I think that would be something that we could work through. But I'm reticent to give an answer that says, yep, we should open it up for all, because I don't think that's the right approach.
Would you mind then, Dr. Bryce, letting us know what your final decision is? Because I would be interested, like Karen, in knowing we have some classrooms that are self-contained, and it's pretty hard for them to experience distance learning. So I
was just wondering if we had looked at it or considered it. I didn't, you know, mean to.
It was a great question you asked. I don't have any issue with that question. I worry about it, and so do a lot of other people here. So I think we can get some sort of handle on it. Yes, Vic.
Aaron, as I know, you always ask good questions. Don't worry about that. All right.
Isn't that good questions? Yeah.
We'll talk about that later. But anyway, my concern is not for all the people that you're talking about right now. My concern is for the parents. My concern is for the parents who have got to struggle to try to feed their kids, pay their mortgages, et cetera, and then may have to leave the job because they have to take care of their 6-year-old who can't go to school anymore, and somebody's got to supervise them. Now, Erin and I had a discussion on this a while back, and there's a school, I think, in California. Erin, correct me if I'm mistaken, but I think Erin said there was a school in California where they arranged to have a location where the parents could just make sure the kids were in school with their laptops, and they would be being virtual, but they were in the school in some location where there was supervision for them, so that the parents could go to work and they could make the money to pay their bills and feed their kids. The other aspect of it is the fact if we can get the kids in the school who have to be fed, we can feed them while they're in the school also. So I'm just looking at the fact of and I think, Jonathan, I don't think we've had this discussion before. I know I had it with Erin. I can't remember if I had it with you. But I mean, at some location where we could have supervision and say to a parent, okay, any parent, I don't care whether it's an IEP, a 504, an unemployed person, whatever it might be, send your kid to school with the laptop, and we will supervise. And instead of being virtual in their house, they'll be virtual in our building, and they will be safe. And I'm going with Kali on that. And the fact is that we have a situation where we have to bring some kids in just to keep them safe, believe it or not. Thank you.
Absolutely. No, and Vic, we actually did have that conversation, which is one of the things that led to our discussion, my discussion with Diane and Amy for Cozy. I guess the question is, the question is whether or not that goes far enough. Let's see how many parents sign up through Cozy, and if there's excess capacity. If there's excess capacity, that will lead us, right? Because let me just tell you what I know we've got. What we have are buildings, right? And so if we've got excess capacity of parents of younger children that need supervision, it's something that we can handle.
But I'm
So-
also I'm throwing that out there, Jonathan, because obviously, as I said, Erin and I talked, there's got to be a community in Cal, and I don't know which one it is. You'd have to trust, and maybe Erin knows, where they've already done it. So we say, okay, call them or find them, and how did you do it so that we can do the same thing? That's basically.
Yeah, well, I mean, don't forget, Cozy is our version of that, right?
Yes, I know.
And so if Cozy is going to have, I don't know, and I saw Diane with her hand up. I don't know if they've got 20 seats or how many seats is Cozy going to have?
Amy Braxo's on the line, so she can answer that for us, and she's prepared to send something out tonight to families to let them know that the support is available. Amy, can you share a little bit about what you're thinking?
Hi, everyone. Yes, so Cozy is ready to go. We will open at as many schools as needed as long as our staff can support it. So just learning this tonight, we'll start working on that as soon as the meeting is over. But if we can run it at all 4 schools, then we will do that, if that's what the need is of our families.
Thank you.
So we'll first send out the application to our current families. I'll give them a short time frame to respond, and then I will send it out to any other Bristol Warren families to see if there's need as well. We do take DHS, so families that are in need and qualify for that can participate. We serve snacks. Kids will need to bring a lunch, and we'll make sure they get all their work done during the day as if they were home doing distance learning.
And Amy, what's the capacity?
So each school's capacity is 30 at each school. So if we could staff all 4 schools, that would be 120 kids a day. But we could be creative with classrooms. That's just what the space is with social distancing in our cafeterias.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Listen,
Can I ask Amy a question? Will there be a cost associated with this? And will this open up, be up? Okay.
We'll cover the cost.
And will it be open to the middle school as well? So will we have the middle school 6th graders at least?
No, so we're only licensed through 5th grade, so we cannot take 6th graders at this time. But I could reach out to DHS to see if that's something that they would do an emergency license for. But I also don't know if I would have the staff for it, and that might be the bigger challenge right now.
You know what?
so Dr. Bryce, you'll wrap this all together and put it out, right?
So what we'll do is, right, so I feel really positive about what we're doing at the elementary level. If it is the goal of the committee for us to think about a middle school option, if I get a nod of heads, if it is the goal of the committee for a middle school option, we'll explore that tomorrow.
All right, before, I think I don't know the answer to that, but I know that everybody's been talking because it's been a long time since we really talked together as a group about COVID and about what's happening in our schools. And I think this was a really good discussion. Sheila has a question, which I'd like to entertain, and then we will finish up. And yes, I think it is the will of this committee that you look at the 6th graders, because there's not much difference between a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old for that matter. At least not in my mind.
Yep, we'll do it.
Sheila.
Dr. Bryce, I had a question about the testing facilities. So you said there's going to be added ones. So we currently right now have a testing facility at Stop and Shop. Are you adding extra ones or?
So first of all, I'm not adding anything. This is the testing protocol that RIDO is setting up for different school districts so that students and staff, it is different than the one at Stop and Shop. And so they are the ones, all they needed from the school district was whether or not the district would be interested in participating. I told them yes, and now they're going to follow up. And of course, Ellen is my point of contact, and RIDO will reach out to Ellen to set it up. It will be more like a community testing focus utilizing, they have some new rapid tests that they are using for this program that they want to use in schools so that they can very quickly identify individuals that are positive and remove them so that we can keep more staff and students in buildings.
So have they said what schools, or are they gonna like put some in, like in Warren, some in Bristol? Are they gonna be at every school? Like, do you know how it's?
You know what? They literally announced it to superintendents. They gave us a briefing on it, I think last week, and then sent us the survey, and I answered the survey over the weekend.
Okay, so you're gonna get us more information as
they have not provided districts more information yet. And
okay, I'm just curious because the Stop and Shop one is right there, and
Yeah,
that
but
is only for teachers and staff, students.
it's completely different than that one.
Okay, if you can get us information as soon as you get.
Well, as soon as they give it to us, and we don't expect it until sometime in January.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I want to wrap this up. Does anybody else have anything they want to say? All right, good enough. There's nothing to vote on, nothing else on our plate. So I would wish all of you happy holidays, and I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Yeah.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Thanks, guys. We'll see you in January, and enjoy, and don't hesitate to communicate. How's that? That's
I like that. Was a good one.
goal, isn't it? Yeah, I think I have 15 texts on my iPad right now. Anyway, enjoy, and thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you soon, and stay safe in the storm.
Happy holidays.
Happy
Good night,
holidays.
everyone.
Merry Christmas. Bye, guys.